This conference will now be.
So I have started recording of the session. Let us begin with it. Okay. So last time we were discussing about one scenario, that how infrastructure is set up. Fine. So today we are going to discuss that when you enter, okay, there is one interview question usually people ask, that when you enter a URL in browser, so how does it work? For example, I'm typing a www.servergyan.com. So how does it get resolved? How does it work? So can anyone tell me that how does it work? Like what happens when we enter the URL and after that, how does it work?
It will first route 53 will route the according to the URLs region, and then the application load balancer will balances, and it will sends to the particular EC2 whatever the server. And if there is some like a social security group and restrictions or NACL restriction, it will not allow to like that particular. It will allow to the particular server to where the URL lies. So.
Okay. Anything else?
Once we are hitting the request from our laptop desktop, it will go through the our mission NIC card, and it goes to the ISP provider, and after that it moves to the local DNS server, which is a .com server. It will check to the naming servers, and after it will pick data query from the actual server. Where is the website located in? Before so and so.
Fine. Anything else? Okay, not a problem. Let me explain. So when I try to access any website like servergyan.com, so what happens here is, like if we try to inspect it, let us go to network first. When I hit here, when I try to refresh this page, what happens? You will see here, first of all, it goes to servergyan.com. So the status is 200, but when we reach till this particular point, so there are a couple of other things which takes place in between. So what is that? Let me show you that. Whenever I enter URL within my laptop or maybe within mobile, so every mobile or every laptop has one network interface card which is known as NIC, NIC, network interface card. So within every laptop, every desktop, every mobile, there are four like main settings available. First of all, the IP address, which is allocated to this particular device. Second thing, the net mask. It means subnet mask, you can call it. So that is entered here. Then after gateway, it means if that particular device has to go out on the internet, then what device or what particular IP address that will use to go out of the network. Fine. And finally the DNS. Now what DNS it is? So there are a couple of type of DNS. Let me tell you that type of DNS we are going to discuss right now. So the very first DNS is, which is known as local DNS, or this is known as caching only as well. So what does it mean, local DNS or caching DNS? So whenever we configure our website, whenever we configure the infrastructure for the organization, so at that moment we have to have a local DNS as well. Why it is so? Because every time when we are hitting this particular URL, So we should not be traveling to public DNS. It happens that particular DNS is known as local DNS, or the DNS which a company sets up for its own setup. For example, 90% people, they definitely prefer to open google.coms and every day, or maybe multiple times in a day. Or sometimes it is usually seen that whenever you open a new browser and you just try to see, so by default Google is your home page. Like if I try to search anything, so whatever I try to search, fine, so that goes to google.com. It means google.com becomes your default browser. So rather than going to DNS or maybe going to the particular main DNS, or this particular DNS, which is local DNS, can have the detail of this server. Fine. So rather than traveling onto the internet, our local DNS server will be responsible to resolve that particular IP address or that particular domain name. This is known as caching only DNS server. This does not hold record, like this particular DNS server does not have any zone. Like you must be talking about like forward lookup zone and reverse lookup zone. So we do not have any sort of zone here. But yes, all the data, whatever it fetches from other servers, maybe your ISP DNS, maybe Google DNS or some other where. So this particular cache that data. Now there can be another question for how long does it cache? So it does not have its own settings. This cache data based on the particular TTL which is defined by the DNS. Fine. Now, are we clear on this? That this does not have its any of the forward lookup zone or reverse lookup zone. Moreover, it does not have its own TTL caching settings. It caches the data based on the particular parameters provided by the main DNS server. Now, if this DNS server does not hold the record, then the request will be forwarded to your main DNS server, which is public DNS server. Because when we set up this DNS server, whatever we enter within our NIC, so within this DNS server, we have to enter the detail of forwarder DNS. Forwarder DNS means where, if this does not hold the record, then where request will be sent. So request will be sent to your DNS server, maybe to your ISP or maybe to AWS, maybe to Google DNS server, wherever you want, you can forward it. There is no restrictions. But in 99% cases, most of people prefer to have their ISP DNS server. Because whenever you get an IP address or you want to host any public website, so obviously your network provider provides you four main things like IP address, netmask, gateway, and DNS. So this DNS will forward request to your ISP DNS. Then it will be responsibility of your ISP DNS, then where it will send the request and where it will fetch the details from. Fine. So primarily, whenever you will try to access any website, it will go to your IP, it will check your IP address, network, gateway, DNS, and rest of thing it will check. Then after it will forward request to nearby ISP. So if you want, I can type in here, request will be forwarded to your nearby ISP. So the nearby ISP will be responsible to resolve your query. Whatever query you have, whatever domain you are trying to access, your nearby ISP will be responsible for that. If it also does not have, then it will go to your root domain. Root domain means it will go to your root server. So ideally there are multiple domain name servers. There are overall 13 DNS servers. Let me type in here. So we have 13 overall, and going forward it will become 12 only. So what are these 13? Like .com, for example, someone can ask you what are the root domain servers like .com, .org, .edu, .nic, .gov, and others. Fine. Now let's talk about what are the type of DNS servers. So first of all, we have caching only, which we enter here, which we have at this particular point, that is known as local or caching only DNS server. Next DNS server we have is primary DNS server. What is primary DNS server? That if your caching DNS server does not have any information, then it will send request to primary DNS server. And in most of cases, this primary server is provided by your ISP. It means Internet Service Provider. Fine. If this also does not have, then you can have an entry within your NIC card, so that is related to your secondary DNS server. Now, what is secondary DNS server? This server also provided by your ISP only, and if your ISP does not provide secondary, then you can enter only one IP address 8.8.8.8, which is of Google, which means if no DNS server is responding, then this server will definitely respond for your record. Now let's come to the point why we are discussing this. So whenever we talk about website resolution, whenever we discuss that how does it work, so we have to ensure that these are the things which we are trying to figure out, and this is how it is going to work for you. This way your website works and your website name, domain name gets resolved. So there can be one another question, that how many DNS server can we enter within our like DNS configuration file. So there are only three options available: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Only three domain server you can enter within your, if it is Linux, then you have to enter within /etc resolve.conf file. So this file supports only three DNS server names. Fine. Any questions so far, guys, here? Your voice is not clear. Can you repeat again?
What is the use of etc host file?
Once again, your voice is not clear. Can you type in chat box?
Okay.
She is asking what is the use of host file.
Okay, what is use of etc hosts? Okay, not a problem. Let me tell you that thing. That what is use of etc host file? Okay, so every system has etc host file, whether it is Windows, Linux, or Ubuntu, whatever it has, whatever flavor it has. So it has etc host file, and this particular file is used to point any specific server against your domain name. For example, if I want to edit this particular file and I want that google.com should be redirecting to, okay, let me tell you that, okay, let us do one thing. Ping servergan.com. Fine. So I have got the IP address of my website. So what if I enter like this here? First of all, I will have to mention the IP address, and after that I'll have to mention the domain name, www.google.com. For example, I want to check that the website is working or not. So rather than pointing it directly to DNS server, first of all, I can check with IP address and domain name. And now I have made entries of it. So for example, if I try to open google.com now, so you will see the difference here. It means google.com is not opening because the particular certificates and other things which I have, so that do not match, all the like requests do not match to google.com, because the server where I'm trying to send the traffic, so these particular certificates belong to servergan.com rather than Google. So that is why it is saying that the particular connection which you are trying to make with google.com is not secure, first of all, because the certificates do not match. That is why it is showing this type of error. You can see like attackers might be trying to steal your information from google.com, which means google.com is a authentic domain and I am trying to send the traffic of google.com to some other domain. That is why it is giving some problem, because the hit is going to my server, the particular server which I have entered here. So my system is trying to resolve this particular entry against this IP address. So what happens here is, what is the sequence? First of all, rather than looking out for your resolve.conf, first of all, your system checks all the entries which are available within your etc resolve.conf file. If this file does not have any entry, then it will start looking for your local DNS server, then primary, and then secondary DNS server. This is how your system works. So you can make any entry within this particular file, and using this particular file, you can define any custom host name with custom IP address. So am I clear on that?
No, sir, I didn't get. Theoretically, I am clear with the DNS working, but practically, I want to know the usage of every file, etc host, resolve.com, name.conf. So, like theoretically, I am very clear with the DNS working, how it works, but practically, I am not clear.
Okay, not a problem. Let me show you that thing. So resolve.conf has two IP address. First of all, this IP address belongs to my ISP. My ISP has given me this name server. So I can have one more name server here. Name server I can specify here, maybe 4.4.2.2. So this particular name server is provided by my ISP, the particular ISP where I have taken the connection of internet. So this IP address is provided to me by that ISP. If this local DNS does not work, then it will forward all the requests to google.com, Google DNS server. If that does not work, then it will forward request to Yahoo DNS server. So these are resolve.conf and host.conf file. Now let's talk about name.conf file. So when you have your own bind means Berkeley internet name domain. When you set up your own DNS server where you are going to define your primary and your forward lookup zone and reverse lookup zone. So at that moment you need to configure your name.conf file. Name.conf file is related to DNS server. When you are going to set up your DNS server, so at that moment you have to set it up. But as of today, 99% organizations do not prefer to configure these sort of DNS servers if they are working on public internet. Like in fact, it's been a couple of years, I have never seen any organization is having its own name server. Most of organizations are using either of Google like your GoDaddy name servers, or the particular name server provided by Google, or maybe AWS, or maybe Azure. So you can have your internal and your public hosted zone using Route 53, Google DNS, and whatsoever you have. So we do not configure name servers as of now. But though once again, I will tell you that etcresolve.conf is the very first file which we use to configure any custom domain name against any IP address. Custom domain name, like I can point google.com to any specific IP address. Although that will not be authenticated, reason being I am pointing to a fake IP address that will give some error based on the certificates. Fine. Then after, I will have this particular file to use that I can enter multiple custom domain names here. Resolve.conf is checked after this particular file. This is the particular file which I want to check before checking any other thing. Whenever I try to resolve any domain name, first of all, this file is checked. Once this file is checked, if there is entry found, then obviously my server will my system will react accordingly. If there is no entry, then it will go to your resolve.conf file and it will go to your local DNS server first. Then after, it will go to public DNS. This is the sequence here. Name.conf is used only to configure your main and your primary DNS server. For example, if you want to have your own DNS server, you want to have your custom DNS server, then there will be a software known as bind, B-I-N-D, which means Berkeley internet name domain. You will have to configure that, and then you will get to know how the things are done there. You will have to define all the IP address there. You will have to define all forward lookup zone, reverse lookup zone, all the type of records like MX record, PTR record, TXT records, everything you will have to set it up there. That is the main configuration of your name.conf. Okay, so if I try to resolve it once again, so now google.com will open because I have removed the entry from my name server, or you can call it like from my resolve.conf, I have removed the entries. So now it will work properly without any problem. Okay, so now we are talking about, these are two main files, resolve.conf and etc host.conf. So this is the main configuration file where you can define your custom domain names and this is the configuration file where you define your domain name servers. And there is one more file, this particular, depending on the type of operating system you are using, etc sysconfig and network. So if this is Ubuntu, then this will be the main configuration file, etc sysconfig and network. And if it is RHEL or maybe CentOS, then etc sysconfig, then network dash scripts slash ifcfg dash eth 0 1 2 3 4, depending on the like number of network interface card you have on that server. So these are the main files which you need to take care of at the time of network configuration. So very first one is etc resolve.conf. Okay, that is not conf, that is conf. Resolve.conf, etc host, etc like sysconfig network script, ifcfg eth 0 1 2 3 4, depending on number of interface you have on your system available. Fine. Okay, now let's talk about that what would happen next if someone is going to ask you that how you have set up your infrastructure. So last time we discussed about that we can have couple of other components, but right now we are talking about high availability setup, that how do you set up high availability on your in your environment. So this is how it works. First of all, your request will be your system will try to resolve request from local DNS server. Then after it will go to DNS. Now DNS will resolve the actual IP address. Let us consider that your local DNS does not have information about your website, whatever you are trying to access. Now this DNS will be responsible to resolve maybe example.com. Then it will forward to the request to your load balancer. Now what is this load balancer? This load balancer is placed on the top of your multiple EC2 machines. And as you see, we have multiple target groups here. Very first target group, your second target group, and your third target group. We have three different target groups here, and we have only one load balancer. Why it is so? So reason being, we have three different applications hosted which are working under same load balancer. Because whenever we create load balancer, so we have to utilize that load balancer very optimized in a very optimized manner. There is no need to have one load balancer for every URL. We can have one load balancer for multiple URLs. Getting point? Now what would happen here is, first of all, you will set two type of rules here. First of all is host based routing, and second one is path based routing. Let me show you that how does it work. Let me create load balancer and let me show you that how does it work, how to set that particular rule. So it will take me a while to create that particular, just allow me to have a moment. I'm going to create a load balancer and I'll show you that how to create these rules. Just a moment. I'm going to create application load balancer. See, we can create two type of load balancer, either internet facing or internal. Fine. So I'm going to create demo load balancer only. I do not have a SSL certificate within my account, so I'm going to work with HTTP only. I will select all the availability zones wherever my servers will be created. All the servers wherever I want to have my instances running, I will have to select this particular. This is also one very important question, that can my private hosted zones have public internet access? For example, you have all the private hosted zones. Okay, let me draw this particular, then it will be much clear. So within a VPC, this is my VPC, and there are three different subnets. Very first one, second and third. Okay, so over here I have a NAT gateway. On the top of these two, I have NAT gateway placed. Let me type in here NAT, and over here I have internet gateway placed, which means IGW, internet gateway. So if I want that one elastic load balancer is working here and this ELB is public. So if public load balancer wants to send traffic directly to these particular servers, all the servers which are created within these two availability zones, so will it work? So the answer here is no. So at least one subnet has to be associated if you want to serve public internet, if you want that traffic should be served from these instances as well, then you have to associate under this particular section whenever you are selecting the subnets, or you can call it like availability zones. So at least one public subnet has to be there if you want to serve traffic from public load balancer, and you want your server should be running inside a private zone, private subnet. So let us consider this subnet and this subnet are behind net gateway, and this particular subnet is behind your internet gateway. If I do not select this one, then my load balancer will not be able to send traffic to these. So at least one subnet has to be there which is under public availability zone, under public subnet. So this is how it works. You will have to select one public and rest of private subnet you can select here. Clear? Any questions here, guys?
Yes, sir. I have one doubt. Suppose that we have three subnets in which two are the private and one is public. Is it
Yes.
possible to place all our instances in the private subnet and our ELV in the public, so that we can serve our traffic through the ELV, and we can use the private instances in the private subnet?
So if all the instances are in private subnet and you do not select any subnet which is in public availability zone here, that will not work.
No, sir. We can select the public subnet here, but we will not place any instances in the public subnet.
Repeat your question once again.
Like, sir, suppose we have three subnets.
Okay,
Right.
like we have three over here. Yes.
Yeah. In that, two subnets are private, one is public.
Okay.
And then when we configure our auto scaling group,
So we can select only these two.
yeah, like that, then it will work, no?
Yeah, it will work. It will work. So that is required only to have networking enabled, because your public load balancer does not interact with direct with your those servers which are created in private availability zones, in your private subnets. So you can select these two availability zones for creating your resources, and this particular for managing network. There is no need to create resources here, but this will be required to route traffic from public load balancer to these private availability zones, these private subnets. Clear, Rohit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let's talk about security groups. So we can create a new security group. So ideally we should have a separate demo ELB SG. We need to create a separate security group for load balancer. Ideally, most of people, I don't know why, because I have seen most of organizations, what do? They have the same security group which they associate with their EC2 instances. The same security group they apply here. That is not a right practice. We should have a separate security group. Reason being, because we just want to allow port number 80 here, because it could be possible on your EC2 machine, if you have a single security group, so it could be possible that you want to allow different ports as well. Maybe port 2020, maybe port 22 you want to allow, maybe port 53, maybe port 21, any other port if you want to allow from within your VPC, then obviously those ports will be allowed here as well. So that is why it is not recommended to open different ports here. Now when we talk about routing, so we are going to create new target group, demo-eg, I can name it here. So there are three different options. This is also asked in interview, that what sort of target groups can I have. So either you can select instance, any specific IP address, or maybe lambda function. Fine. So what is going to be path? So slash, that is fine. You can select your health checks you can configure here based on your requirement. Then after target, so as I have only one server available, I will register that I have only one server running on port 80. Then after I will create it. That's it. Now let us go to this load balancer first. So under listener, if you see that there are some rules over here, I can add some rules. So the rules will be couple of like this. First of all, I will have host header. So I will set like www.servergyan.com if the domain name is this and path is /abc, whatever domain, whatever. Okay, I will have to another rule for path, and path is /abc. Then it will forward request here. So this is how you can set up rules. Not only this, you can add multiple rules here. Like if you save this configuration and you insert one more rule, so you can have any other domain as well. Maybe domain is www.example.com and path is going to be /admin. Then traffic will be forwarded to maybe same server. You can have different domain running on the same server. So this is how you will set the request here. Like if host is servergan.com and path is abc, then traffic will be forwarded here. If domain is www.example.com and path is /admin, then it will send request to here. Otherwise, you can select a different domain here and you can forward your request accordingly. Fine. So that is what I was trying to explain here within this diagram. Like we have set up host based routing and path based routing, that if your application is working, your maybe example.com and path is xyz, then it will forward request to here. So for sure, now there are a couple of more components. First of all is you can see that we have like multiple, we have two listeners created here, port 480 and port 443. We have two listeners here. Then after we have auto scaling. It means all the servers which are running inside these target groups. Like this is first target group, this is second target group, this is third target group. Fine. Then after on the top of these EC2 machines, we have security groups enabled. These are security groups. Fine. Then after on the top of the subnets, we have network ACLs implemented. As we talked about last time. So on the top of these particular subnets, okay, yes, so on the top of these subnets we have network ACL implemented. Security groups work with specific instances which are created here, and network ACL works on the top of complete subnet. So someone can ask you like, what is the sequence of configuring a network ACL and security group? So first of all, your network ACL comes into picture, and then after your security group. Fine. Okay, so I'm just trying to explain you that first of all we should understand the infrastructure, that how does it work. So if someone is going to ask you that can you set a particular infrastructure where things are working properly, so you can explain this diagram that first of all we have our laptop or desktop, then after we have to configure these basic settings here, then request will go to route 53 or maybe to DNS. Then after you will have your load balancer where multiple listeners are configured. It means port 80 or 443 should be accepting traffic from world. Then we have target groups in place. We can have multiple target groups associated with same load balancer based on host based routing and path based routing. Fine. Then after we have auto scaling group in place, so which will be responsible to maintain the infrastructure, which means at least at a moment 2 or maybe 4 or maybe 10 servers will be up and running all the times, irrespective of requirement. So based on the traffic, based on the rule you will set with this particular auto scaling group, so obviously number of servers will be up and running. Then what would happen here is when we are talking about security, so these servers will allow traffic from this load balancer only on port 80. Then after this database, this is the database which we have, this is our RDS. So this will allow traffic from only these particular EC2 machines, and the particular security group which is associated with these security group, these particular EC2 machines. So this is how you are going to secure our infrastructure. Now, for example, someone can ask you that, okay, then how will we log into this particular, because this is this has a security group that allows only port 80 from this load balancer. Then how we are going to log into these servers and how we will do the configuration? For example, if there is a need to do deployment, then how we are going to perform that? So for sure, like we have a bastion host, or you can call it like jump server. Fine. So this jump server's IP address will be allowed on port 22 on these particular servers. Like either we can allow within same security group, or we can have another security group created, and after that we can manage that. Fine, guys, just a moment. Yeah. Yeah, sorry guys, actually there was a call from office. It was really hectic day for me yesterday. I was on call till 3 a.m. Okay, not a problem. So, are we clear with this diagram? Are we clear with this infrastructure that how to set up things?
Sir,
Yes, please.
I have some doubt regarding the target group and the auto scaling.
Okay, please tell me.
Like in the production environment, we have multiple type of server, like for the web application or some processing server, like the app server,
Mm-hmm.
and we place the server in the different target group.
Okay.
So, do we have to create a auto scaling group separate, like for each target group, or we can manage with one auto scaling group?
Okay, so if all target groups are supposed to have same infrastructure, then we can create only one auto scaling group. Otherwise, we are supposed to create separate auto scaling group. Reason being, because it could be possible this particular target group might contain some different AMI. This will require some different AMI and different sort of deployment, and this will require some different sort of code and different sort of like AMI. It
Yeah,
will require.
like that for the SAM, like you said, the target group will have the different AMI. So how does it work?
So how does it work? You will have to create separate auto scaling group for it. Reason being because auto scaling group is not a paid service. We can create as many as we want because auto scaling group is just a software configuration, and AWS does not charge us for having software configuration. So we will have to create separate auto scaling group for this.
Okay. Sir, you're explaining about Watson host. Can you explain that clearly?
Okay.
So I have one more question here. So how does the database server will be running on a private IP address? So how do you get an exposure to the external user? Do you give access, or how does it work?
Okay, your voice was not clear. Can you come again?
So database server will be working on a private IP address. Most of the organizations. So how does
Yes.
the database server will be exposed to the users?
Okay, good. So let me tell you, when we are talking about that, how this database will be exposed to users. For example, this is your on premises, like OPDC, or you can call it like Office. Fine. So your Office IP address will be whitelisted on the top of VPN. Like you will have a VPN tunnel, and within that VPN tunnel, you can whitelist the database. Like all the users who are sitting within your office, they will be allowed to access the database on the top of a VPN tunnel, because by default you will not be allowed. So either using a jump host like this, we have Western host. So either using this particular way or using your VPN tunnel, you will allow your office employees, maybe some developers, some like testers, they would like to hit some query on the top of this database. So you will have to allow this particular on the top of a VPN tunnel. Because as you said that this database does not have a public IP address associated. So in that case, what is required here is we have to configure this particular security group to be allowed to accept hits from these IP addresses which are associated with your office IP address, which means obviously you will have one public IP address in your office. So that public IP address will be allowed over VPN under this security group.
Okay.
Okay, does it application load balancer serves only availability zones? If we want to serve other regions availability zones, if it is possible?
Pardon, once again, what did you say?
Application load balancer is only serves data to same availability zones, one region.
Yes.
It is possible to serve other regions availability zones?
So it is possible, but let me tell you how it is possible. Let me tell you that thing. So by default, as you see that this is a regional service. This is not a global service. Now let's talk about that how it will serve across region as well. So very first thing is we are not supposed to configure this service in such a manner that we have configured load balancer to serve traffic across availability zone or sorry, across region. Why it is so? Because when you create load balancer, so you have to select this particular mechanism here, that from where it will be accepting traffic. Like when we select the target group, so we can, rather than selecting this particular, we can give it a name. So then after we can select it a target here. So once we create this load balancer, we will have to select the target, like what about target we are going to have here. So we will have to select the IP address as target, and that IP address can be anywhere, maybe within same availability zone, same like different availability zone, different region, like on maybe on premises data center it could be. So it could be anywhere. So we can obviously send traffic anywhere using this particular elastic load balancer, but condition there is that whenever you are selecting this particular type of configuration, it means some latency will be increased there. For example, if you are sending traffic from Mumbai to North Virginia, for example, your server is running in Mumbai and your load balancer is configured in North Virginia. So there will be a latency for every hit, whichever will be traveling from North Virginia to Mumbai, Mumbai to North Virginia. So option is available, but you have to choose the particular things very wisely. Okay.
Okay, I got it. What is the listener and how many listener ports we can have access to the ELB application load balancer?
Okay, so listener means the particular port which you are going to open. Let me show you here. So the port 80 is known as listener. It means load balancer will accept traffic on port 80. We can have another listener. Maybe I want to add another listener as port this one HTTPS, and in fact this is customizable. Maybe I want port 448 to be available for HTTPS protocol. For example, I want to have the security policies. These are the security policies. So like someone can ask you that how do you change or how do you modify ciphers? Do you know about the ciphers? That what the ciphers are?
Yes, it is encryption algorithms.
Yes. So these are the particular predefined set of algorithms which are available on the top of elastic load balancer. So you cannot customize it. You will have to select most appropriate based on your requirement. So these particular security ciphers will be available for you. Then after you will have to select one certificate from here. Maybe you may have from IAM, or maybe you can have you may import from your own the particular certificate which you have created. You can import it, or you can have your from IAM. You can request for new IAM. There will be some validation verification, and after that you will be allowed to create certificate. So like listeners are the particular ports which will accept traffic from the world for you on the top of that load balancer, whatever you are going to configure. So as I have only one listener, it means this load balancer accepts traffic on port 80 only. No other port is allowed by default. So
Okay.
So what we are doing right now is, what is the purpose of today's class? I want you guys to understand that if someone is going to discuss about you the complete infrastructure, then you should be able to explain that, because there are a couple of guys. It could be possible that they may belong to DevOps team, they may belong to AWS admin, they may belong to Linux, or they might be working on any specific component. So this diagram is here just to help them out, that how do they need to explain while facing interview, that how does network work, how does an organization set the complete infrastructure. That is the core, and that is the basic funda of like having this particular diagram and like conducting this session. Because most of time people love to ask about your infrastructure where you are working currently. They might ask you that how many servers are there. So based on the particular requirement, based on the particular your experience, you can have number of servers. Because like if I say that we have thousands of servers, so no one is going to check that really do we have 1,000 servers in our infrastructure or not. But yes, if I say that we have 1,000 servers in our infrastructure, then we should be able to explain that why do we have these many servers, what sort of applications are running on that. So it could be possible that someone can ask you that how many databases you have. So as I have explained only one, so you should be able to explain, okay, you can say that we have one master and two slaves. You can say that you are not only using MySQL, you are using Postgres for a couple of applications, you are using Mongo for a couple of applications. There is one Oracle database as well. Might be there is some like MS SQL database as well. So you should be knowing that particular based on your organization. So I just simply want to make you feel that how to set up infrastructure. For example, if these servers are running on Windows, if these are Windows server and IIS is configured here, then obviously 99% possibilities will be there, then this particular database will be MS SQL. If these are Linux box and maybe PHP, maybe any other you are running PHP, maybe Python, maybe Perl code you are running, so most of the chances are there that this is going to be MySQL. Or if you have some like document database, so it could be Mongo database. Or if you have really like enterprise level of infrastructure setup, then this could be Oracle as well. So based on your requirement, see, currently we are just talking about the flow of the organization, that how do organizations set up these type of workflow. Because you will have to explain your infrastructure, and these are the diagrams which helps you understand that how do things work. Like as Rohit asked a question, that do we need to have separate auto scaling group or do we need to have a one? So obviously we need to have separate auto scaling group based on these particular domain and these particular services inside these target groups. Fine. Okay, so now let's move ahead and let's talk about these particular load balancer.
Sir, I am having one question. Sir,
Please,
if we
please.
want to set up if we want to set up proxy servers in between, where we need to put the proxy and cache server?
Okay, so on the top of these servers and after this load balancer, that particular proxy server will be set. Maybe that could be proxy server or caching server. So after this load balancer and on the top of these target groups, so that will be lying between these two, the target groups and load balancer. Why it is so? Why I'm telling that it should be lying somewhere here? So it should be lying here. Reason being that whenever hits will come to your proxy server will be working as a load balancer itself. Because what is proxy? Sort of load balancing. So that should be lying here somewhere. So based on domain name, based on path, based on like caching requirements, so that will take action accordingly. So you may have multiple proxy servers or you may have only one. So your proxy server can work in two ways. Either it can work for you as a caching server, or it can be working for you as a like proxy server or maybe load balancer only. Like we can you can have Nginx in itself as a proxy server. So Nginx works as a load balancer as well as a web server. Okay.
Okay, we are clear.
Sir, one more
Good.
question. If they're asking this one, which project you're asking in front end and back end, what should we answer? Like if we are using Java project and other project.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
So
what
if
should
you are
we?
using Java project, so you can easily say that these servers are running with Tomcat. The particular EC2 machines which we are talking about, so these EC2 machines are running with Tomcat, fine, and Tomcat directly interacts with database. So maybe it can be a little more complicated. Like we have Jenkins here. Let me mention Jenkins. So this is Jenkins server, and we have Git as well. Maybe Bitbucket you can have, or you can call it Git, whatever you name, you want to name it, you can name. So we have Git here, we have Jenkins here. So what happens here is there are a couple of developers as well. Let us have a dev team here. Let us mention dev team. So developers are working continuously and they commit their code to GitHub or maybe Git, whatever the tool you are using. So as soon as dev team commits the code to Git, so DevOps team is responsible to pull the code from Git, and after that, after pulling that code, they will hit Jenkins. Now Jenkins will do all the build like building process. It will execute, and from after building, it will do the deployment on the respective target groups. Whatever target groups we have, so it will deploy there. Like this is one-time setup, but whenever there has to be deployment, so developer team will do the development, maybe bug fixes or whatever. Then after it will be pushed to Git. Now Git will send a post notification to Jenkins. How does it work? We will discuss in the Git and Jenkins class. When we will talk about the Git and Jenkins within a single day. So we will discuss about these two components, like how do these like send notification and how to configure these things. Fine. So we will discuss about conceptual part, that how do things work here. Because in interview 99% chances are there no one will ask you to set up the configuration. No one is going to ask you that okay, configure a Jenkins server for me. They simply want to understand the workflow or the particular key components and the concepts which are mainly used with the particular tool. So that is what we are discussing here. So this is how the flow works. Jenkins, and Jenkins will build the code, and after that it will deploy the things like maybe jar or maybe war file inside your Tomcat. So you can say that you are having Tomcat running on these particular EC2 machines.
How we explain a deployment strategy, because of without any staging area, can we deploy into the direct servers, production servers?
No, never. It is not supposed to be there. So let us do one thing. We will discuss deployment strategy during during Git and Jenkins session, not today.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
I can shortly tell you, because without that the particular session cannot be completed until unless you know the deployment strategies, that what is rolling, what is AB, like what is canary, and what is blue green, like what is red and black. So that's, if we do not have that sort of deployment strategy, and we should know that, so till that time the session will not be completed. I will definitely explain you that. Fine. So for now I just want to have a question. So are we clear with this particular picture? Are we clear with this, that if someone is going to ask you that how to set up infrastructure, so will you be able to like explain it?
Yeah, yes,
Yes,
sir.
Okay.
sir.
Okay.
Sir, ये
Every
वाली
department
picture
has their,
मैसेज कर दीजिएगा sir.
Yes, please, one by one.
every department has their some set of systems. Every developers and testing team and production team, pre-prod team, every team has their own setup of systems has there.
Yes.
How can they maintain, and how can they check what is the server, and we can work, and how they are controlling the access to the users?
Okay, not a problem. Let me tell you that. So when we have this particular, like this is our particular AWS account, and we are working with a specific region. So what would happen here is there will be a VPC. Separate VPC will be there for like dev team. There will be a separate VPC, and inside this VPC there could be like multiple availability, like multiple availability zones we can have, like multiple subnets we can have. Fine. So this is for dev team. Same thing will be applied for maybe production team, like UAT environment. Like this is for dev. Dev team will work within this VPC only. Then after there will be a replica of this particular. So wherein the team will be working for UAT. UAT means user acceptance test. Fine. There will be a separate VPC of production and staging. So every environment should have a different VPC. Because VPC is just a software configuration and we need not to pay anything for it until and unless we are using NAT gateway with it. I will repeat it again. Until and unless we use NAT gateway with any VPC, we need not to pay anything for it. But yes, the machines which you create, for example, you have only single VPC and you have 100 machine running with that, so you will have to pay for 100. And if you have 4 VPCs, 25 machines are running within each VPC, then you will have to pay for 100 machines only. So end of the day, infrastructure requirement will be same, but you can segregate that for security purpose, maybe for audit purpose, or maybe some infrastructure isolation or segregation purpose. You can have that. So ideally there are 4 environments. First of all is dev team. Dev team will require its own environment. Second one is going to be testing team, wherever they are testing the code. Third thing is going to be UAT. And UAT is considered to be as a pre-prod environment as well, and you can call it like staging environment. Because obviously, like if we can name it multiple. Like first of all, we have dev environment. Let me name it here dev. Let me make the size big as well. We have dev. Then after we have stage. Then after we can have here pre-prod, maybe UAT. Then after pre-prod. Then after prod. So if we have these many environments, it means we will have to invest a lot of amount of money within setting up these infrastructures. So what we do here is, rather than having UAT environment as separate, we can do one thing like stage environment can be considered as your UAT environment, that business team will test their things on this particular environment. We can call it like this: dev, stage. Pre-prod is very minimum requirement, so all the database servers are common. Only a few application servers are there. Like if we are running 20 application servers into production, so we will have only one application server for pre-prod, just to deploy code and test it with production database, nothing else. So these are the environments. We should have a separate VPC for every environment. Maybe one VPC for dev, one VPC for stage, one VPC for maybe pre-prod and applications, and final VPC will be there for production environment. Now there can be a question. So do we have connectivity enabled between dev and stage and UAT in prod? So there should not be any connectivity between dev and prod. Obviously dev and stage might have connectivity, and pre-prod and prod may have connectivity. So that will be depending on the particular requirement. So if someone is going to ask you that, do you have connectivity enabled between? So obviously you are going to say no. It means you will not have any connectivity between dev and prod. Pre-prod and prod, which is only
don't have.
Yes, please.
If we don't have the connectivity between the UAT and pre-prod, then how will we deploy the application?
Okay, so for that, there will be one more VPC. Let us keep it as a VPC here. So this is known as management VPC. Management VPC, what does it mean? So this particular VPC, okay, let me make it a bit large. Okay, yes. So management VPC will have couple of tools within this VPC, like Jenkins, like monitoring. So this VPC will have connectivity with every environment. This VPC will have connectivity with every environment, maybe dev, prod, stage, and whatever, because these are shared and management services. Because Jenkins has no role in production. For example, if we do not have Jenkins, so we can do deployment manually. That does not make any difference. But the main point here is, if you are going to like have these particular services on every environment, it means that will be sheer wastage of resources. You need to have a separate environment. You need to have a separate VPC, which is known as management VPC. In fact, if you want that your Bastion host, which is known as jump server, So your jump server also should your jump server is also supposed to be within this management VPC only. And because this VPC has connectivity with every environment, which means whether once you log into the jump server, you can log into any other server. So we need to have a management VPC on the top of all VPCs.
Means, sir, that tools will be integrated with the production for the deployment, no, sir? Then?
Yes, yes. So this Jenkins will be responsible doing deployment maybe onto dev stage of production. So obviously you can have like a different credential for dev stage and production, but this can be called as a common service. Or if you want that, like you want to associate, you want to provide access to developers or maybe to some QA team to do deployment, so you can do one thing, like you can have role based access or maybe job based access. So specific jobs will be allowed to for specific users. For example, QA team will be allowed to execute jobs only for dev and stage environment, and DevOps team will have access to prod and pre-prod environment. Same thing goes with monitoring, because dev and stage servers are not that critical, but if you want to have monitoring, then obviously you can set monitoring on the same environment. So there will be segregation on the top of monitoring tool, that what are dev servers and what are like production servers. So either you can have a common monitoring tool or you can have separate monitoring tool. But monitoring tools are not supposed to be part of production VPC. These are shared services. So this is how, when we have Jenkins in management VPC, so Jenkins will have connectivity with the dev, stage, pre-prod and prod environment. So that is why having single Jenkins server will be, we will be able to survive with single Jenkins server. So this will help us to reduce cost, as well as this VPC has connectivity with everyone, but these do not have connectivity with each other. So that is how we can segregate these environments with the help of this particular management VPC. So am I clear on this?
Does it include Ansible and Terraform on the management server?
Yes, you are absolutely right. So all the components which are shared, which are not like environment specific. For example, you have database, so that will be lying here only. You have application server, that will be lying here only. So all the management tools, whether that is ELK, so do we have any productivity from the side of ELK? No, we have only monitoring things. Do we have any productivity with Ansible? Obviously no, that is just for DevOps, like ease work. Do we have any productivity from Jenkins? No. Monitoring? No. Do we like host anything on the top of Gem server? No. So all the management services will be lying within this VPC. This is known as management VPC. And from here, like having single server, we can manage all the environments. So are we clear on this?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So
Sir, voice is not audible, sir.
so am I not audible to you only, or others are also facing the same issue?
No, for us and all, I think it's okay for me.
Okay,
No.
cool. So are we clear with the concept of management VPC? Why do we have this?
Yeah.
Yes, clear.
Clear.
The type of environments do we have? Dev, stage, pre-prod, prod.
Yes.
Okay, are we clear with this particular picture as well?
Sir, I want to know in this picture, if it is this one, if it is front end is this one Tomcat, what would be the back end? We need to explain back end application.
Tomcat is never
Like
supposed to be
DB.
front end. See, Tomcat is the applet container. So front end should be Nginx. Tomcat should be your application server, and then after your database. Tomcat is supposed to be your middle layer application, because Tomcat does not only work as your web server, it works as a servlet container, which means it holds the jar file and it does processing on the top of it. So you can say that you have Nginx as a front-end server, Tomcat as a middle layer, and maybe RD as your MySQL, Postgres, and Mongo, maybe Oracle as your database. Although Tomcat can be used as a front-end application as well. But if someone is going to ask you, then define it in such a manner that Tomcat is working as your application server, Nginx you are using as a front-end application, front-end web server, and MySQL is being used as a database, because no one is going to check your application, your company infrastructure.
Okay, sir, how auto scaling group will distribute the load to different EC2 instances in a particular target group?
Come again, what did you say?
So how the load will be distributed from auto scaling to these target groups?
Okay, so here, auto scaling group is not responsible to distribute load. Load is distributed using your elastic load balancer. Auto scaling group is just there to ensure that the number of specific instance should be running all the times. For example, if there is high load and this EC2 machine goes down, then auto scaling group will spin new machine for you. Wherein application load balancer, this load balancer will be responsible to distribute load with between these two. Will be responsible of distributing load between these two instances and these two as well. So load distribution, traffic distribution is the work of, or is the particular responsibility of load balancer, and auto scaling group is there just to ensure number of instances. It means in like environment state management is the work of auto scaling group. Environment state management.
Okay, so like if 1,000 users are coming, so on the basis of that, it won't auto scale.
So once again, it will be like responsibility of auto scaling group. So based on the rule you will have on the top of auto scaling group, so we will discuss that. Maybe let's discuss it tomorrow in detail. But for now, just understand. So we can have multiple rules. For example, like if there are 1,000 hits per target, if there are 1,000 connections made per target, then auto scaling group will spin up new instance. If there is high load on these two servers, then auto scaling group will spin up new instances. For example, if the server is not healthy, then auto scaling group will spin new instance. Maybe the average response time of these instances is really higher, then auto scaling group will spin new instances. So multiple rules are set on auto scaling group rather than load balancer. So well, let me tell you, like we are discussing that, not a problem with that, but these are the basic concepts of AWS.
Okay.
Who are the responsible for the creation of these environments?
Obviously, either AWS or DevOps team, AWS admin or DevOps team will be responsible for it. Let me tell you, if you are working with a middle level of organization, then there is no AWS team separately. Only a DevOps team has to be there. They are responsible for deployment, build, automation, managing AWS, creating infrastructure, designing network, designing VPC architecture, everything they are responsible for it, including your security or security observation performance, which is known as vulnerability assessment. So everything DevOps team performs. There is no, like if you are working with like IBM, TCS, Accenture, HCL, Wipro, so these sort of big organizations have separate teams for every individual component. For example, they have separate team for Windows, they have separate team for maybe Linux. Within Windows, they have separate team for AD, they have separate team for maybe IIS server, they have separate team for disk management and Windows patching. So they have isolated teams. But if you talk about small and mid level of organizations where we can get lot of money in terms of salary, and only those teams do not have like these isolated and segregated team, because single team is performing equal to multiple team. That's why they are paying this much. Otherwise, if they have separate team for Windows, separate team for Linux, separate team for deployment, separate team for different functions, so why would they pay you that much? So when you are getting high salaries, so obviously some expectations are there. And to meet the expectation, DevOps team has to be ready to learn each and everything, whatever is being used within the environment. So guys, are we clear on this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So couple of questions were there within that group today. Like yesterday, I could not answer that, reason being because since morning 8 a.m. I was on call with, there was some production issue going on, so I was on call till 3 a.m. today. So I got free today itself. So I could not answer those questions. So I will go through one by one and I will try to respond that today. As soon as I'll get time, I'll definitely respond that. Fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sir,
thank
one
you.
more question I'm
Okay, thank
having.
you.
Yes, please.
Sir, this one for the front end, this one, how many servers can be set for the Nginx minimum? Like 4 or
So, okay, sir, that completely depends on the number of requests you are getting and the particular type of operating system you have, the size of operating system you have. For example, like if there are 1,000 hits per second, so you need to have at least two web servers with configuration of 4 GB of RAM and like 4 CPU and 8 GB of RAM. So at least two
okay.
servers are required. First of all, to ensure high availability, and second thing, like load distribution. But if these servers are
Okay.
optimized, only then. Otherwise, number of servers will be higher.
Okay.
So for any individual component, you need to say that at least you have two servers. First of all, for load distribution, and second one is high availability. That if due to any reason one server goes down, then second should be there, like serving your traffic as and when required. Fine. So okay, I'm stopping this recording now, and
Okay,
we
fine.